Welcome to the Earthtide podcast. I am your host, Zach Knight, and I'm here with my gloriously moustached co-host, Dan Ralph.
Hello, everybody. We are coming to you live from Earthtide Studios.
And how are you feeling today, dude?
I am rough. I had a bit of a late night, not doing anything,
Anything special?
Nothing special, just kicking it with some friends, but
Nice.
I feel rough.
You feel rough?
I feel rough.
You don't look rough, so that you've got that going for you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
Nice. So we've got a pretty awesome episode today, very informative and very sort of cool outlook across sort of creative and music industry a bit with our guest here, Mr. Steve Cannatelli from Future Artist Development. How was this one for you, Dan?
I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed talking to Steve. He's got some really cool insights and outlooks on the music industry and how it goes. And I really like his energy. He's got a really positive vibe as well. So I really enjoyed it. And, it's always cool. I mean, as you know, the podcast was quite lengthy. So I think we'll definitely have to get him back in because we didn't even touch the sides of some of the things that I wanted to pick his brains about. So
for sure. I mean, he's a wealth of knowledge, that dude, and like just such a positive person when it comes to his sort of outlook on just being a creative in general, not necessarily just music industry stuff. And I've had the luxury of learning quite a lot of stuff from him, working with him, as an artist, and also sort of, getting to talk to him from a producer's perspective, talking to him about different people that he works with and all of that kind of stuff. And then there's obviously the common background you guys share as nu metal boys from back in the day. Back in the day.
90s boys.
That's for sure. But Steve is a very multi-talented dude, and yeah, I think you're all going to enjoy this episode. We might, just because we didn't really do much of it in the episode, but we'll give a bit of a plug to where people can find him if they want to. If you want to check out his artistic endeavours, you can check out his new band that he's been doing for a bit now. They're called the Suburbs, and they're sort of a bit of a homage to classic rap rock. You can find them on Facebook or on Instagram. They are the Suburbs Official. They recently just finished up a tour with Beach Panic, just playing in Frankie's Pizza and the Workers Club, which I had the luxury of seeing them at, and they smashed it. First live show in Melbourne for some, kind of veterans of the scene coming back and do something a bit of fun, bit fresh, and honestly, I can't recommend seeing them enough. If you like a little bit of that sick, rap rock vibe, it's your style.
Yeah, they nail it.
They nail it.
Yeah,
for sure.
If you want to check out Future Artist Development, which is Steve's artist and band coaching business, go to futureartistdevelopment.com. I've heard nothing but awesome things about Steve's work from a variety of people.
I mean, he's incredible. I've had the luxury.
Well, you have with your band, Colour and Shade. You guys did his program?
Yeah, we did his program. A number of people that have worked with me in the studio are doing it as well. And I can tell you that I've seen a marketable, big improvement in the way that bands have performed live after they've worked with Steve. So, I couldn't really be an advocate for the guy more. He does a really good job, and he brings out a genuine performance in people. But enough of our rambling here. We're going to get on to this episode. Dan, you ready to roll?
Let's do it.
All right. Welcome to the Earthtide podcast. I'm here with my gloriously moustached co-host, Mr. Dan Ralph. How you doing, dude?
I'm good, man. Hello, everybody.
Yeah, if anyone's listening. And we've got ourselves a nice guest, Mr. Steve Cannatelli. How you doing, dude?
Good, mate. How you doing?
Yeah, not bad. Just sitting here sipping my coffee in this really warm room.
Yeah, fair. That's not too bad in here. I prefer it like this and cold. Bring on 45 degrees.
Yeah, you love it toasty though. You love the sweatbox.
I do love the sweatbox. I'm just, but I'm always running cold. You look at me. I'm still in my pants, and it's the middle of summer. It's like I don't wear shorts often.
To be fair, I don't think I've ever seen you in shorts.
No, I only did the other night at the show you would have seen for stage aesthetic, but other than that, no, I'm not really in shorts.
You got to have those sexy shins showing, hey mate. Is
just
that the
shins, that's it. Three quarters only, and I forgot to pull my socks up, so you shouldn't even been able to see my shins.
Oh mate,
sex sells.
I was going to say you got to start adjust off the shins, well, because that's that nu metal life, right?
That's it. That is that nu metal life. That is that 1999 life.
We're all about that 1999 life here, though, Dan. We've never forgotten. He was literally talking to me earlier, showing me some demos he's doing with his band, and he's like, yeah, man, I want to get that hot dog flavored drum sound going on.
Yeah, having a chat about that last night.
You're going to take it to the Matthews Bridge for that.
Yeah, that's where it's got to go. That's where it's got to go.
Definitely. So, Steve, man, I mean, I've known you for sort of on and off for quite a while and a lot better recently. Then I tell you what, it's been an interesting ride for you and I, obviously doing all the stuff that we've done, you know, with my band, and then obviously working, you know, and seeing all the different things that you've been doing with your own stuff. But you're such an interesting dude, which is why I kind of figured it'd be cool for us to get you in here and have a nice open conversation about just life and music and everything. But I guess, you know, want to kick things off. When did you start getting into music, dude?
So when I was 8, so
Hells yeah.
Yeah. So it was basically again, like it was, I'm a lifestyle kid. I do everything for lifestyle. I mean, obviously I'm a creative as well, but I like to reap the benefits of the lifestyle from being the creative, if that makes sense. So, you know, I was in year 8 and my uncle was a musician, so I'd been around music most of my life. I'd always dabbled here, dabbled there kind of thing, but not really, you know, didn't really take it too seriously. But then again, you know, at 7, 8 years old, 6, whatever, you don't take anything seriously. So, but yeah, I was at grade, I would have been in about grade 3 or 4, and the grade 6, some grade 6s were in a band, and they were playing I Want to Hold Your Hand by the Beatles.
Oh, man.
And literally,
you know, that classic metal tune.
That classic, yeah, that's it. And pretty much straight after, it's pretty funny, straight after it, the girls just went straight to them, and I was like, that's for me. That's what I want to do. And I went home that night, and I went to my uncle's place and was like, I want to learn guitar, and that's where it started. So, you know, yeah, girls.
Awesome. So you started music pretty damn young, which is kind of, I guess, pretty similar to both of us as well. I know I started playing piano, I think, when I was 6, and I wised up and picked up the guitar when I was 13.
Whatever, man.
I don't know. I reckon you might have gone backward.
Yeah. I mean, let's be real. I definitely could have been like probably a better musician if I had stuck to the piano. But yeah, you know, starting young, man, it's like it's the best thing when you know, doing music. You know, the younger that you are, the better, honestly, because it's so good to have music in your soul from such a young age. And I mean, you know, I it's kind of ironic that I'm getting to know you a bit better now because we're both about the same age, so we would have grown up, you know, seeing a lot of the same kind of things going on, you know, around the world and in music and just in life in general from you know, such a young age. But I don't know. It's kind of a strange thing that I've noticed with the way that people grow up with music now, because I feel like the biggest thing is they're just missing out on like the gateway to heavy music through Tony Hawk's.
Yeah.
Tony Hawk Underground 2. Was that just Underground 2? Was that
man, I went from number 1.
Just number 2 had the best soundtrack.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely.
Had your Papa Roach, had Body Jar, had, I can't even remember, it was so long ago. It was like 2001 or 2 that came out, I think it was. Maybe 2001, I think it was.
Yeah, it was around that time.
Because that was
when
still
I was
on
like,
PS1, wasn't it?
Yeah, PS1, yeah. Tony Hawk 2 on PS1, yeah.
Yeah, man. Because it was that. It was 1080 snowboarding.
Man.
Yeah, that had a rip-off. Yeah.
Yeah, and then, I mean, I played Tony Hawk's 1 more than number 2 for a long time because my brother was too good at flatland tricks, so I wouldn't let him play number 2 because he would just start and just win, and then it would just, you know, be over and done with. He's a younger brother as well, so I can't even win.
Oh, dude, my younger brother's the gamer in the family as well. I at a very young age was just like, yeah, you play, like I'm not even, it's all yours, man. Like I'm gonna go do something else. But yeah, Tony Hawk's 2, the snowboarding one. There was a
Need for Speed Underground had some pretty good tracks on it. Maybe not that sort of alternative thing. It had a lot more.
I bet it's good
bangers on it, but
yeah, but some of those were pretty good.
Yeah, from memory. I mean, it's been so long since I've even picked up I think actually, correct me if I'm wrong, but does a PS1 have like those all-in-one consoles that have come out? Like, is there one that's come out for PS1? Yeah, there you go. Yeah, because that'd be pretty sick. And I'd imagine Tony Hawk's 2 or 1 would be in that. Yeah, because it'd have like 80 games.
You'd fucking hope so.
Yeah,
like, for
definitely.
sure. I'm not sure. I don't know off the top of my head, but pretty sure. Because there was a bit of an issue, I know, with some of the games that weren't put onto it.
Yep.
And people were kind of shitty, but I think it was a contractual thing between the creators of game.
Yeah.
Totally.
I'm pretty sure that's what happened. Otherwise, they just dropped the ball and left some shit off there. So
I mean, I could always just, ask some of the people that I know who work in gaming about all that kind of stuff, because that's a whole different creative, world. It's honestly, it's where it's kind of where a lot of people who start in music end up going into like the game, making, whether or not they're coding or making music for it or mixing it, all that kind of stuff, because it's the biggest industry in the world creatively now.
Oh, absolutely.
So much bigger than the music industry, and so much bigger than even now the movie industry and TV industry. Gaming is it now.
Is it? Yeah, gaming is number one. I mean, I did some gaming parodies with Kimmy Smiles when I was playing for her for League of Legends, and just seeing how quickly we got to the millions and millions of hits, as opposed to doing a cover, doing a parody or a cover of a song, as opposed to it was a parody and a cover. It was Love Yourself by Justin Bieber, where Kimmy had changed the lyrics to be about League of Legends.
That's amazing.
And
that's
then
so good.
The video clip was like League of Legends animation. And it was something that we did towards the end of my time playing for her. So I think it was like late 2016, early 2017, I think it was. But I really wanted to pursue that avenue more with her. But she was more, she's now moving to Korea, I think, in the next month. And she's going to be doing her YouTube thing over there. But yeah, I definitely saw how big gaming was just by doing those League of Legends parodies. And yeah, it's definitely no joke.
It's not a joke at all, man. But obviously, you've got to do all of that kind of stuff, and that's definitely a big part of a lot of the things that you've told me that you've learned on a sort of larger scale of things, in the music industry, and just what you can actually really do, outside of just playing in a band and doing any of that kind of stuff. But, obviously you said you picked up guitar when you were young, but everyone knows you for spitting the mic.
Yeah.
When did you get really started into that?
Well, so I tried basically back when I was 8 to 13 years old, or even a little bit younger, maybe 8 to 11, there wasn't really, everybody was a guitar player. Do you know what I mean? There was bugger all vocalists and bugger all bass players. There was drummers and guitarists around everywhere. So I tried my luck for 3 or 4 years trying to find, not even get into, but just trying to find a band that needed a guitar player with the same influences that I was influenced by. And they just weren't coming up. They just weren't around. And obviously all we really had back then was, music shops and going in and finding advertisements on a big board, singer wanted, or, bassist wanted, or whatever. So I would have been roughly around 13 that I found a band called Brain Fade, which were put together by a management company, and basically they were looking to put this band out and find a vocalist for this band, put them out and mentor them and get them signed, blah, 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 rah, rah, rah. So I saw the ad, and the ad had all the same influences that I had on guitar, but they were looking for a vocalist. And I was like, well, fuck it. I just want to, like I said, I'm a lifestyle kid. I'm not, as you know, I've played guitar in some bands, bass in some bands, vocals in some bands, fucking tambourine in some record, whatever, you know what I mean? Doesn't matter, whatever it is, I'll give it a go, or I'll figure it out. So, I was like, all right, well, I want to start being around my musical peers. I'm at that stage, the 13, building my own identity. I'm sick of being around, sports suburbia, so to speak, and not being able to really relate, you know? And because I mean, I played footy up until that point for years. And, you know, as much as I loved like the team environment, which is why I love the music industry and, you know, being in bands and stuff, is I thoroughly like being in team environments. I just couldn't relate to those people. So I answered this ad. I went in 2 weeks later or a week later with no singing experience whatsoever. And we jammed on some covers. And I think we did Killing in the Name and maybe Blind by Korn. And they turned around to me and they were like, you've got the spot. And so I was like, awesome. So, and that's where I guess, you know, with what I'm doing now, I guess if I reflect right back to, you know, this would have been 98, 99-ish, the guy who was who basically had put this band together would have been in his mid-20s, and he was doing a form of band coaching. He was mentoring, he was sitting in the rehearsal rooms going, no, you need to tighten up here, you need to play harder there, you know, you need to stick to the BPM. He got us playing to clicks, he got us recording, all of that stuff. If I go right back to it, when I think about it, it's probably that dude maybe, you know, starting there and always remembering your start point. I think in the back of my head, maybe something kind of clicked there that, you know, mentoring is something that, you know, is needed for young people, because I can definitely say, at that point in time, you know, at 13 years old or whatever I was, I had no clue about the music industry. And it was dudes like, I think his name was Darren from memory. And it was dudes like Darren that, you know, I was like, hey, I want to get more involved in things. And he was like, you know, call up, you know, what are your some of favorite bands? I was like, oh, you know, Slipknot, Cold Chamber, Machine Head, all of those new metal-ish, you know, metal bands. And he's like, call up Roadrunner Records and just ask them if there's anything you can, you know, do to help. And so I called up Roadrunner Australia. Bob Stevenson answered the phone and he was like, come on down to the offices. And
shit.
Yeah.
That's
and
awesome.
That pretty much led me into a 4-year internship at Roadrunner Records.
That's really sick. And also, interestingly enough, the first time that I've ever heard you tell me about this, which is really cool.
Yeah. It's not like, it's probably just never come up in conversation, but that was, you know, that's how that kind of happened. And then, you know, I started learning the ropes of the industry via Bob. Bob was a great mentor for me. He used to involve me in a lot of things all the way through to, you know, Rob Flynn's down at the offices, you know, come down, meet him, you know, hang out with him. So I got to meet, you know, Fear Factory, Soulfly, Sepultura, Machine Head, trying to think who else, Slipknot, a bunch of those Roadrunner bands for the time. And that at 14 years old, 13, 14, whatever I was just like, oh my God. And then
shitting your pants.
Oh, it was
as you should have been.
Well, it's interesting because you only start to shit your pants when you get a little bit older, and when you're young, it's all still innocent. You know what I mean? So it was like, it wasn't like it was not a nervousness. It was an excitement. It was like, oh my God, you know, I'm gonna meet this dude that has inspired me to do what I do, you know? And so, yeah, it was a bit, I think, you know, as you get older, I think maybe you put them on a pedestal more and maybe you get a little bit, you know, in your mid-teens. Okay. But in your early, for me anyways, in my early teens, I was just like, oh my God, I get to meet this person. I'm so excited. Not like, oh my God. Because at that point in time, I didn't even know if I was going to be playing in, you know, bands for a living or anything like that. So it was all very innocent. It was all like...
I mean, you were still pretty young as well. You know,
I kind of went the other way though. I kind of went from like, as a kid, shitting my pants meeting famous people. Idols as such. And be like, oh my God, I'm meeting this person. And then I actually met Zach Wilde once. I don't know, he must have just been having a bad day or something, but he just... a bit rude and a bit standoffish. And then I was like, you know, did a flip and then was sort of like, well, no, they're just normal dudes.
Absolutely.
Like doing their job, being creative and all that. And so now I'm probably more like, nah, it's just another dude.
Definitely.
There's an amount of, you know, of respect and everything there because I'm looking up to these people as musical inspirations, but
that doesn't mean that they're more important than you because they're just people, you know?
Yeah. Like anything, it's only got the importance you place on it. You know, exactly. You can't, you know, how important is owning a house? Well, that's subjective, you know? It's if you place importance on owning land, it's going to be important to you, but, you know, the guy next to you might be like, I couldn't care less, like I'm going to rent, you know what I mean? It doesn't bother me, you know? I think everything is down to how much importance you place on it. I guess for me, starting, it was like innocent. And then it was like, oh my God, this is actually a serious industry. So you start to take it seriously to a degree. And then you get on the other side of that hill and you're like, yeah, actually most of this is a wank. And then you end up, going back to, well, I wouldn't say back to where you started, but you end up not over it, but you just pick and choose your battles or what you take seriously and things like that. I definitely 90% of the music industry I can't take seriously because it is just a general going backstage. It's always, and I always thought this when I was a kid, it was always weird. You go backstage at shows and it wasn't really predominantly the bands drinking and doing drugs and all of that. It was all the industry people back there, that don't know what it is essentially. And they're racking up lines, of whatever they're racking up lines of and, drinking the rider and doing stuff like that. And the band's usually sitting in the corner being humble, and I was like, hang on a minute, this is just,
Yeah, that sounds about right, unfortunately. And I mean, the other thing as well is like, a lot of the bands, like it takes, getting to a pretty high level before the bands are even in a position where they have the luxury to be able to have money and all of that kind of things for any of that stuff, period. Because most of the time, bands, most of the way up until just past like an intermediate sort of professional level, they don't have lots of money. And, there would have been more money around then, but even then, like,
it still wasn't a great amount of money. I mean, the Australian music industry has never seen a great amount of money. Let's be fair. Like maybe in the days of, the 70s and 80s, when you had, whether people know it or not, like shows like Young Talent Time, had such a big impact on Australia's music industry. You know what I mean? It had a lot of some big exports come out of that show. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you've got Tina Arena. I don't know whether Kylie or Danny Minogue were involved in that, or Natalie Imbruglia. Maybe Natalie Imbruglia might be a little bit too young, but there was a lot of, you had Molly Meldrum doing Countdown. You had, there was a lot
huge.
of, there was a lot of things in the Australian music industry that generated, and we still generate quite a lot of money. The issue is that the money now is not ending up in our pockets. It's constantly, to keep things going, we have to reinvest. So it's like, you really do have to have this attitude of money comes, money goes now, because, not saying it was any easier to draw money from the Stone back in the day. There was still somebody that had to pay you, and chances are, and your royalty checks and all that, chances are that they were late paying you, or your royalty checks were expired by the time they got to you. But yeah, I think now the issue is that there's so many bands, not enough platforms, very few gatekeepers, and because of the population, those gatekeepers are very, very important, because obviously we only have 25 million people here. So whoever the gatekeepers let through, they'll get exposed to, let's say we're talking like, what do you got on the wall? The Unify scene, right? Yeah. So let's say with the Unify scene, those, like, the audience for that would be maybe 100,000 people in Australia. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? That's off the top of my head. I'm guessing there'd be an audience
around
about 100,000. I couldn't imagine it being, if it's any more than that, I couldn't imagine it being much more. But I could be wrong. I'm just going based off the fact that Parkway Drive seemed to sell out 10,000 people. Amity Affliction seemed to sell out 10,000 people. If they go down the coast or around Australia and do 7 or 8 shows of 10,000, that's, roughly give or take, somewhere around that, because your core audience, predominantly most people are into those bands, so they're going to go see those bands.
Yeah.
So we're talking, it's still a very minute amount of money, and therefore you've got a lot of bands fighting for scraps off the table, so to speak. Not so much your Parkways and your Amities. They're well and truly fine. But, fighting from, just looking at your poster again, fighting for, I'm sure they're generating good money and being sustainable, but, like that is murder. You know what I mean? I would imagine those guys, after all expenses, and this is just from my knowledge of dealing with a lot of international, metal bands. If they're walking away with 15 grand in their pocket a year after everything, so they've spent 10 months on the road and they come off with 15 grand each in their pocket, that's probably the reality in my head. That's what I see a lot of, but they haven't had to pay for anything through, you know what I mean? Through the year, it's all been sustainable.
Rent and all that sort of thing.
That's right.
Yeah, and the other thing as well is, because most of the dudes in these bands, they're all very smart people. They've been around for a while. They've got a lot of advice and things from everywhere. Their income stream isn't just from the band.
Well, you'd hope not. You'd hope they'd be smart. Any of those bands would be smarter than that. But but you never know. Some people have got good drive. Other people, are like, yeah, cool. I sing in a band. And that's it. And they don't really do anything else with it. The amount of people that I've got to explain to that's like, hey, like, you're not going to get a house and car off this, but what you can get a house and car off is the business that you establish using your profile as a platform. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's where you make your money. I couldn't do what I'm doing now if I didn't play for Kimmy. I had to assert my profile in that. Mm-hmm. And then from there, I was able to, I guess, more to the point, I asserted my profile from there, and then bands started to trust me to come into their rehearsal rooms, because it's a pretty big thing to let somebody into your rehearsal room and, rip your band.
Do you have any like people that are, I guess, really stubborn? Do you have any like super stubborn people you've had to work with where it's like the rest of the band may have been like, yeah, let's get Steve in to do all this stuff, and then you've got one person that's like, no.
Oh, absolutely.
You got to try and like work around that. And is that?
I don't usually work around it. I just give them immediate results. So it's one of those things where, like, let's take who's a good friend of mine, Daniel Marinakis from Belhaven, right? So Daniel flat out did not want me in that rehearsal room. Like, I've been friends with those boys for a long time, but Daniel was just like, what are you going to do to, help our performance, man? Like, our performance is already really strong, which Belhaven's performance was really, really strong.
Definitely, yeah.
But the issue was the musicianship versus the movement, what they were missing because of that intensity. And I'm like, there needs to be some dynamics in your performance right now. It's just go from start to finish, which is all good and well, but finding a balance of musicianship and, moving around the stage is super important, because you still need to deliver your songs to your audience so they recognize them, and so I knew Daniel didn't want me in there, which was completely fine. And like I say to any band, I'm like, I've said this to many bands, I'm like, and I hope this doesn't come across arrogant, but I'm like, I haven't lost one yet. And if you feel that you don't get what I have promised you out of this, show me where you didn't get it, and I'll basically give you your money back, right? Because I've got all the confidence that I'll be able to take them from A to B. If it's their lack of confidence based on the fact that I'm doing something new that hasn't been done before, that I didn't even intend on, really, it just happened. I understand the skepticism that may be involved in it. It's like, not only that, let's face it, because of some of the old school cats that really exploited artist development has a dirty name, right? But it was in the industry up until the mid 2000s as a part of record labels. You would have artist development, and money put into it. Somewhere along the line, this has been exploited by not just one or two people, but a lot of people on a global scale. And then artists didn't trust putting money into development, because, there were, and I won't name the person, but I used to be a session musician. I was under this person's management, and I used to play for a lot of different people around Australia. Now, some of the people that he would put me in playing for, man, they'd put upwards of $100,000 into their career, and they were still playing, cafes on Thursday and Friday nights and stuff like that, And it was almost like, he was, and I saw it over a period of time, and then I ended up leaving his management, also because he owed me money and things like that. But he would basically sign an artist for a development deal. The development deal was 4 years, and then hold the artist there and extract as much money from the artist as possible. You know, hey, we need to do this. It's going to cost this much. Hey, we need to do that. It's going to cost this much. But it actually wasn't, because there was no significant booking agent or no significant label backing or anything like that. Those artists just stayed in the same spot, and he was just extracting money. So,
that's horrible, man.
yeah, look at these are the things that happened that gave arts development a dirty name. And these things happen, you know, across the globe with major labels as well. You know, if you get signed to a major and, you know, you're 12 years old, your parents are flying you back and forth in and out of places, hotels, all of that stuff. That money's not coming from the label. That's, you know, you might, your studio time may come from the label. You know, you're, you know, getting trained in media and stuff like that. That may come from the label, but the flights and the accommodation and all of that it takes to go to America for 3 weeks and stay in LA, then come back home and then go for another month and all of that, that's all out of your own pocket. So there are a lot of people that got burnt by, and again, because there are no certainties in this industry, there's a lot of people that got burnt, you know, hey, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And then they launch upon the world and the world goes, yeah, actually, I don't want to hear that. And then hundreds of thousands of dollars have been lost by not only the family, but the label. It's a fine line. And I guess with artist development, back in the day, I guess it was to get an artist big. Whereas where I'm coming from is artist development is to get the artist or the act functional. You know, is to get them functional and give them the best education and shot at success. You know, because it's like, without better use of, it's like the pursuit of happiness. Do you know what I mean? It may be next to impossible to actually achieve. Or when you are in your, like when I got to my successful stage of my career, I thought it was going to be different than what it was. You know what I mean? Like you think it's, and you get to it and you're kind of like, oh, this is cool, but I didn't expect it to be like this. Okay. And when that does happen, what's the word? Like, yeah, it's not everything that it's made out to be on band DVDs. You know what I mean? It's not that.
Well, it's like when, you know, you save up all your money and everything and you go to get that really nice shiny car and you get in the car and you drive the car around the street and you're like, I don't know if I like how this car feels, but it's too late. You've done it.
That's right.
You know, and that's the thing. And so why, instead of doing that, why not be in a position where you can, you know, go through a process like what you're doing for people, where they can spend far less money and just get, like, you know, be as prepared as they can be, and also have the blunt truths given to them about what the realities are from, you know, yourself and from other people that you associate with who have been there and have experienced it and actually can say, you know, you could do that, but you might not necessarily need to sink all your money into that because it's not going to actually give you what you want most of the time. If you want to do it, it's your choice. But at the end of the day, you're fueling people for a chance to get to the moon. Yeah, they won't necessarily get there, but you're giving them the best chance that they can to actually get there.
Giving them the tools they need to do the best that they can.
Yeah.
And then the rest falls into what the industry's doing, if it's the right time and place for that band and that style and everything as well, which a lot of people seem to like not really think about. They just think, oh, well, I've got some good songs for this style. It's like, yeah, man, but if there aren't people out there that are currently listening to that style, then you could be the fucking best. But if it's not happening, it's not happening. And I think a lot of people kind of think about that a lot. So it would be good to have someone like yourself, you know, to say, especially to the younger kids, that no, this is how it is and this is how
we did it.
You got to be prepared for this to happen too.
Yeah, and we did it just as recently with, I don't know if you were in the studio with Zach when they were doing the vocal tracking, but with Wake the Blind.
No.
So like as recent with those guys, exactly what you just said is I went into their rehearsal room and whilst they were really proficient at what they were doing, it was 2010, not 2020. You know, so as in what they were playing stylistically. Yeah. So I basically just said to the guys, look, you know, if you want to go forward, we need, and if you want to be playing metalcore, we need to look at what is starting to emerge, you know, and what is starting to emerge in metalcore, and I guess you could say groove metal incorporated, is your bands like Lotus Eater, Loathe, Dealer, you know, all of those bands. And I put the boys onto Lotus Eater, and then Adam Spackman, the drummer, like instantly was just all over it and just sent me through a whole bunch of demos in that style. And I was like, all right, like now we've got some, you know, the songs are still, you know, because they're just doing that style for the first time, it's going to be in its very infant stages, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's still a better platform to start from sounding like a current band than it is to start your platform sounding like a past band. You know, so you're 100% right with everything you just said there. It's a lot of bands don't think about that. They're just like, oh, this sounds really good, but forgetting that the bands that they grew up on are now irrelevant, and that style is irrelevant, you know? I love doing nu metal, but I do it for myself. I would never expect Triple J to grab a hold of it, you know what I mean? Like,
sure.
It's just purely for myself, you know? And if you're doing it for those reasons, if bands are, you know, if you're like, hey, I'm going to get in a band to play nostalgic music that makes me feel good, and you don't mind playing to, you know, a max of 300 people or something like that, and you're cool with doing that anywhere between 100 and 300 people, and you're going to capitalize off people that want to hear that nostalgia, all good and well.
More power to you.
Yeah, exactly. All power to you. That's completely fine. If you want to be a career band, then similar to like, you know, how did Parkway Drive get that big? Simply they were the first ones to do it.
Yep.
And
pioneers of that sound.
They were the first ones to do it, and they made sure that, you know, early on they got with the people who were really good at pioneering that sound as well. I mean, friggin' first album, go and work with Adam D. Like, how much better can you do than that?
That's
literally one of the pioneers of that kind of thing going on. And, you know, that's obviously what worked for them. But the big thing now for all these artists going around, especially obviously, you know, we deal a lot more with the Australian scene, but, you know, it's interesting seeing obviously what's going on with all the different sort of genres within the scope of alternative music in Australia, how varied it really is. But I'm looking forward to seeing if there is going to be like a breakaway band, in like what that breakaway band in 2020 is going to be, because there's a number of big players sort of going around now that have sort of doing the thing that you sort of mentioned. Generally, they'll start in Australia and then they'll break overseas and then they'll come back to Australia. And some of them are breaking here, but I'll be curious to see who is going to be doing that here, because I know you've had a couple of clients that you work with that have broken overseas and then come back here. But I'm curious to see who is going to be doing that here, if at all. Yeah, Weybridge.
Weybridge will be the next, like that band. Just it's they will do everything that bands like Harbours or Columbus in the early days and stuff like that should have done, but obviously didn't happen for those bands for whatever reasons. There's a lot of kids that still want that, you know, without better use of bands. Basement, Citizen, they're very good bands. I just meant, you know, I know it's a very generic thing to rattle off bands when you're talking about grunge like Basement and Citizen, but they are very, very good bands. But without better use of, you know, a wider range, because I don't really know too much about it, like Basement, Citizen, Balance and Composure, you know, those.
I call it sad boy hardcore.
Yeah, like that kind of thing. And I mean, it is.
It's not bad. It's just it's kind of what it sounds like.
It has got a little bit of emo with, you know, your early 90s grunge sound, I guess.
Bit of post-rock as well.
Post-rock as well, post-hardcore too. Like, there's a whole lot really when you really break it down. That, you know, bands like Harbours, you know, they had songs that sounded like Silverchair right through to Nirvana, right through to Basement, right through to Balance and Composure.
And Being as an Ocean
as well. Yeah. You know, so there's... Yeah, when you really do think about it, there's a lot involved with, you know, the influences that come into that genre, but there's a whole bunch of kids out there, as we saw at Unify, that wanted to hear a band like Weybridge. And Weybridge were like second band on or third band on the main stage on the second day. You know, everyone was exhausted from that first day, you know, with the weather conditions and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, definitely.
But people came out and man, it was midday and there was a fucking circle pit happening, you know, for them. It just really showed that there were people there that were like, yes, like, you know, if you had to put a metalcore band on that day, I don't know, at that spot on that day, I don't know if you would have got the same reaction, purely because I think people wanted to hear a breath of fresh air, you know, a bit of, you know, to a band to break up that monotony that can sometimes happen when you're hearing, you know, breakdown after breakdown. And then a band like, you know, Sean from Weybridge, man, I've said it to a few people. I reckon, you know, if Kurt Cobain's soul ended up in anybody, it was that dude. Like he's just the type of dude that can, you know, wake up from a sleep, wipe his nose with his sleeve, chuck a guitar on and play the fucking best set of his life. You know, it's almost like if you prepare him for it, you take away some of the magic. You just have to let him be spontaneous and make sure that the band's really strong around him. But yeah, Weybridge, I would say, is going to be a band that you're going to see a lot of this year, and probably, I reckon they may boom next year. Obviously, none of us, I mean, including the band, but none of us saw what like happened with Stan Atlantic. Like none of us saw that one coming. Like, including the band themselves, we were all like, you know, cool. You know, if this can get the band to, you know, from here to there, that'd be great. But you know, they did, you know, what, 10,000 cap rooms with that big Japanese pop band.
One OK Rock, was it?
Yeah, One OK Rock. That's it. They did like 10,000 cap rooms through America with them, you know.
Rad.
And One OK Rock are huge.
Yeah.
Like they're a massive band. You should see there's some videos of them playing in Japan, playing in front of crowds. I think it looks like 40, 50,000 people just for them as well.
Totally.
For a band as well. That's insane, you know.
Totally. And yeah, it's crazy. Like none of us, and you know, now Stan Atlantic can go back to the States and sell out, you know, to 400 to 600 cap rooms, and they couldn't do that in Australia. Do you know what I mean? Like they can't do that.
Don't have
here.
the numbers even. That's the, you know, the population here.
Exactly. But it's kind of crazy because I know that, you know, you've had a long conversation with me about the importance of overseas versus the Australian market. I mean, a really classic example of that, of a band that is now sort of solidified in Australia, is Hands Like Houses.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a perfect example of a band that Australia just did not want to know about, and then they went overseas and then came back, and then, man, even when they were doing, you know, huge cap rooms overseas, they were still doing the Ding Dong Lounge in Melbourne, you know, you know, it's, I don't know what it is with it here. And it's quite concerning in the sense that the first thing I hear from any band that I've worked with that tours internationally and comes back to Australia is, thank God the rest of the world, like their scene, isn't like Australia.
Yeah.
You know?
I find it's much more supportive too, generally, in terms of the artist, even playing at the venues and stuff. You get a lot more support from the venue staff as well overseas. It seems like it's a much more like locked down thing than it is here when you just sort of like trudging through doing it.
Especially for you when you went to Japan as well, because that must have been a lot more fun than touring in Australia.
Oh yeah, fuck yeah it was.
Absolutely.
And that was, you know, that was still a small scale tour. Like we're not doing, you know, 800 cap rooms or anything. And even on that level of professionalism and how they treat you as a musician and an artist is just hundreds of times better than how you get treated.
Oh, I agree, man. Look, there's some venues like my band, we played, I've been there a million times, but I'd never played there before myself, but we did Frankie's Pizza up in Sydney. Man, that staff were absolutely lovely. As a matter of fact, I said to our booking agent, Maddie, I was like, you know, whenever we do Sydney, I'm like, let's just keep going back to Frankie's. I'm like, I don't want to play anywhere else.
Yeah, okay,
I'm like,
cool.
the fact that they looked after us so well, like the venue manager stood side stage and watched us and Beach Panic's entire sets. Do you know what I mean?
Cool.
Yeah,
that's very cool, dude.
You know, just things like that. It was like, and then he'd be like, hey guys, that was great. Or, you know, he'd come backstage and be like, how you feeling? You guys all pumped up? You ready to go? You know? So it was really nice to have, you know, a venue manager. Not only that, they gave us free pizza all night, free drinks all night. You know,
amazing.
It was, I said to Maddie, I'm like, honestly, and it's free entry there too. You don't have to worry about, don't have to worry about figures. They give you a guarantee, and it's nice and sorted. Like it's just. You walk into Frankie's, you don't need to worry about anything. And I personally don't want to play anywhere else.
That's it. That's the go-to place.
Man, it sounds like that's where I need to go play.
Man, it's where every band needs to go play. I mean, it's free entry. They look after you really well. People are happy to be there.
Good pizza?
Great pizza.
Fuck yeah.
Great pizza.
Right,
the most important part of
it.
it.
I'll say this. They may not be a sponsor, but this podcast officially endorses Frankie's Pizza.
We definitely endorse Frankie's Pizza
Awesome.
in Sydney. But yeah, I think, when you go to Europe, they're much more accommodating in the sense that that's just how Europeans are. I'm Italian and I've spent a lot of time in Europe. And, when you go to Italy, for example, if you turn around to a promoter and say, I've got nowhere to stay, mate, they'll take you to their place and they'll give you a bed, cool. All of that. The UK, for example, though, different story. It's like the promoter, hey, I got nowhere to stay. Sorry, bad luck. Yeah, you know what I mean? Stiff shit, But Europe, and same in America, a lot of, very similar is like, oh, yeah, sorry, that's not our problem, Europe, on the other hand, are far more accommodating, and a lot of venues, small cut venues especially, will have sleeping
quarters or something.
Yeah, sleeping quarters or something like that, and they'll house you and they'll feed you and they'll do all that stuff. Europe, and this is why Australian bands are going over so much. It's because we're getting looked after better. Like, why stay here and be treated like shit, make no money, have the gatekeepers keep you out, and you constantly have to try to, this is the other thing too. Australia's really cliquey.
Very much
Do you know
so.
what I mean? It's very cliquey, and it's a wank fest. Like, let's face it, it's a wank fest. It's literally like these small groups of people that really are creating their own status by this frat boy kind of club or, mentality of like, almost like, oh, when you get to this level, you can have these friends. It's like, what kind of wankery is that? Do you know what I mean? Like, seriously, once your band, breaks through and gets signed to this label, then you can hang out with, these other guys from the...
Then you've made it, man. That's your big break.
It's literally, but it's great to see. A lot of kids are looking at that now and going, that's so dicky. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's so, like, it's quite funny because, these circles, they're walking around like thinking they're king shit, but they're literally just legends in their own lunchbox, because they're respecting them for the music that they're making, right? But their status doesn't exist, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So the music exists, and that is what people are grabbing onto. But we're in 2020. Rock stars do not exist anymore. No. Your status does not exist. Even if you're, if you're in, let's again, just looking at the flyer, if you're in North Lane or in Hearts Wake, my guess is you're still working a day job as well.
Probably, yeah. Unless you've got a side business going or something like that you've built up over a long period of time.
Absolutely. So which is still a day job at the end of the day. It's
True.
still something that you're doing outside of playing live, Yeah. So let's look at it this way. Off music, you're not making much to the point where literally a McDonald's worker is making more than what some of the biggest bands taking away in their pockets, right? Forget grossing. Grossing, a band can gross $1 million, but what are they walking away with? That's if you're grossing $1 million, your production's probably going to be bigger. You're going to have more crew, so there's more expenses. So yeah, again, a McDonald's worker has more money than a lot of these guys in big bands, and and so therefore, there's really you're not walking around going, I'm rich, I'm high and mighty or anything like that. You're kind of just asserting your own status, which nobody else is really asserting. And it's just,
You and your little group of yes men?
Yeah, pretty much.
And it's interesting because you jump ship from being in the sort of like the alternative music scene, and you jump into the hip hop and the rap or the pop scene, and then especially like in the rap scene, and then it changes completely, and there are very much statuses, like there's very much stars in that kind of scene where it's like Yeah, okay. Like, yes, people respect them for their music, but like they're making, they're making bank off just getting endorsed by like a sneaker label, and then they'll just be like, oh, sick, can you wear these shoes on your Instagram post? Sick, here's 20 grand.
Absolutely, yeah, dude. Product placement is it.
And these people are legitimate rock stars. I mean, like, realistically, right now, the rock stars of the world are rappers.
Yeah, and football players, sports people.
Sports people. I mean, sports people are, but to be fair, sports people have kind of been like
a constant,
especially in this country, because Australians, not all Australians, but a lot of us, not me. I don't know about you either, but I know Dan doesn't really either. But not all Australians idolize sports people, but a lot of them do.
Yeah.
And like a classic example is like, just my partner loves watching the Australian Open and just noticing all of the players on all of the big brand ads in between sets. And I'm sitting there just being like, yeah, I'm pretty damn sure Kyrgios or Nadal got paid a lot of money to be on that ad, endorsing that particular product. And it doesn't necessarily mean that, that they're special. They're just popular.
Yeah, well, what I learned from the YouTube world was, especially when I did the Amplify tour, I think it was 2015, 2016-ish, something like that. When I did that, that's where I really learned about things like product placement. And I was like, oh, wow, like it's not that the money's gone, it's just that it's shifted, right? So it's no longer being really, given via shows. It's actually it's in the social media template. If you have, all right, so I was described by somebody who worked at Channel 9 while I was on this tour. They turned around to me and they were like, the average YouTuber on this tour or Instagrammer has 16 times the reach of Channel 9 on a daily basis, right? Which is 2.4 million people, which is what Channel 9's daily reach is, right? So each person on this tour averaged 16 times that via a post, right? So why would you go to a TV station and say, here's X amount of money, put our ad on TV, blah, 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 as opposed to go to the Instagrammer or the YouTuber and get them just to having a photo or a video, a can of Coke if you're doing Coca-Cola or whatever, and then boom, they drop you 20 grand for it, for the click of a button.
Especially the demographic as well, because the people on social media are probably going to be statistically younger people as well, who will probably have more money to spend on, Coke or whatever, versus Channel 9, which is more probably the older generation who probably aren't as involved on social media as well.
Absolutely.
So it's about the target demographic too.
Exactly. And they'll scale it depending, like if it could be a company that's, I don't know, say Bonds, know, and they want to get this new line out. And so what they want to do is they want to target, for half of the line, they want to target young people, and half of the line they want to target, older people. So they spend their money on TV advertising and radio advertising for the older people, and for the younger people, they just send all their money to social media advertising.
Pretty
much.
It's
done.
That's it, and that's all. Like, yeah, I mean, it was a huge wake up call. For one, the first thing that I learned from being involved in that world is no way would I ever suggest anybody ever put all their eggs into being in a big band anymore, right? Those days are gone, like in the sense that there's just so many other avenues now for, like your YouTubers. Like Kimmy skipped everything and went straight from YouTube to arenas, right? Around the world, right?
Which is fucking insane.
Yeah, which is
nuts.
To go from literally, the computer screen to 20,000 people a night, that's fucking massive, Then I'm thinking about all the years that I had spent growing up, in playing to, 50 people in clubs and, all of that stuff. And you very quickly realize that now with these other avenues, and you still find bands doing it in this old school system, but it's literally a waste of money. It's a waste of your time and it's a waste of money. You should only move now if there are going to be, well, one, you can build your online presence, it's not so much now about, posting content every day. It's about stories, right? People like stories now. The era of likes, I got, 3,000 likes on this post, but gone. No one cares anymore. Who gives a shit? You know what I mean? 10,000 likes, 3,000 likes, whatever. And I think, the new models of Instagram and Facebook not showing that also says to the world, hey, this doesn't actually matter. What people want to see is I believe people want to see things done, and that's your content. So, if you're putting an EP out, don't post, rough mixes and things like that. Of course, you just want to post the final product with the proper campaign, on all the right platforms with the right branding, marketing, all of that stuff. But what your stories can show is the journey to that, and that disappears after 24 hours, so it's not going to stick around forever, so it's actually not going to impact and make you look unprofessional in, you know what I mean? Even if you're in the studio and you're having a wrestling match with your bandmate, you can do that on, and story it, and it's gone after 24 hours and the people have had a laugh, and then it goes, so and at the same time it doesn't stuff around with, when you do post content, because the algorithms, from my knowledge, will favor people that post a lot, but only if they're getting interaction.
Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah. That's how it works.
That's it. So if you post every day and you're getting interaction every day, then they will, bump up your posts. Beautiful things about stories are, you post a story, it goes straight to the front of that line and anybody can access it, And
if people are really interested in your content, then they'll just delve further. And that's the way that the internet works.
Yeah.
If people are more interested, they'll just keep delving into things,
Totally.
And it's an interesting thing. I could talk to you for days about so many different things involved in being creative in the music industry and all that kind of stuff. I did want to. I mean, I will probably want to. We'll polish up pretty soon because I know we've all got things that we want to do for the rest of the day.
Yeah, no stress, man.
I reckon. It could be cool down the line, maybe organising another episode of this down the line with you and talking about the whole kit and caboodle about, the actual business side of like how, being self-employed and being a creative and running the business side of things, because there's so much that the three of us, really share on that as well. Obviously I'm a little bit fresher in this. Dan's been, building guitars and repairing guitars and all of that.
Too long.
For many years. Many years. And being a creative and being a business owner it's a challenging thing. So I'd love to see if we could do an episode like that. And maybe it'd be cool if we even get like someone like Bo in as well to have a chat as well.
Yeah, of course. I mean, Bo is somebody who's been running his own business now for 10 years or so, and he's, it's a pretty massive thing for a guy that, what's Bo's a couple of years younger than me, or maybe 32, 33.
Yeah.
And Bo's never had to work a normal job. You know what I mean? Nice. Bo went straight from Closure in Moscow into recording and into, you know what I mean? Like to building his own studio to, he really did it right. And it was just that he picked the right moment to leave his band and he picked the right moment to start his business. Closure in Moscow, when he left in 2011, 2012, was still a very big Australian band in the alternative scene. Triple J was still all over him. So to leave, and this is the other thing too, he had the smarts to leave when he did and then start a business right away based on where the band's position was,
Leveraged his position in that.
Exactly. And I mean, I'll be real, like I enjoy Closure in Moscow and I liked listening to that stuff. But, when I think about Closure in Moscow and I think about Bo, to me, they're two separate things. To me, he's the producer.
Yeah.
For me, his thing is he's a producer. He creates, quality content. He works really well with bands. Everybody that I've heard has had a good experience with him. I listen to his recordings and his mixes and I go, yeah, this is great. I associate and I remember that he was a drummer, but for me, his ability as an artist versus his ability as a producer, to me, they're separate things and that's what's worked for him.
Oh, dude, definitely. I mean, Bo was the founding member, or one of the founding members of Closure in Moscow. Bo's always had really good foresight. And I mean, with Closure, we didn't have a band in Australia doing that sound. They were the first ones to do it. Maybe the last ones to do it right as well. I really don't think.
I'd kind of agree with you on that. Yeah.
We haven't had too many of those style bands come through Australia, and any that haven't really been able to touch Closure. Like, it's not an easy genre of music to play, let's face it.
No, it's not. No, not at all.
It's, but his ability as a drummer, if you think back to, Bo would have been, 18-ish when he was in Closure. His ability as a drummer for those times, like, especially, even I've had him drum on some projects I've done, and like, he's, I love his tracking method for drums. If he can do it, he'll always do the cymbals separate from the actual
he does
kit.
the Queens of the Stone Age method.
It's sick. Well, apparently Chris Crummett showed him. Is that the right
sounds
name?
Sounds about right. He's one of my favorite producers of all time. So yeah, I'm sure it came from Crummett. And obviously, I know because Bo, that's where he would have got it from, because Bo went and recorded with him.
Yeah, well, they did both records with him. And I think Bo still does mixes with him. Like, I still think they have a very close relationship, and they work on a bunch of bands and together and stuff, which is really cool. But yeah, the first time I saw, because I wasn't really familiar with that process up until maybe a few years ago. I didn't know that process actually existed. I was just so used to going into, studios and the mics were all set up and everything was played at once.
Yeah. The only time I've ever heard of that happening is if people are doing like program drums that they want to use real cymbals, so they get the natural cymbal wash. But I didn't know people were doing that with
separate.
Separate on like a standard kit.
They've been doing that for a long time. And it's the biggest thing is it's not something that can be done well unless the drummer is up to the task, because they have to have the muscle memory to remember to not hit the shells nearly as hard or hit them at all, and just make sure that they're like playing out and hitting the cymbals in the right place and then hitting the shells, because sometimes they'll have things set up where you'll have the shells like covered, or sometimes if the drum is really good, the shells aren't even there at all and they'll just be hitting air.
There you go.
It's tricky to think if you're doing any intricate runs at all with cymbal splashes in between.
Muscle memory, it's very challenging to try and remember, because they would have learned to play everything with a kit, and then all of a sudden half it's not there.
That's right. Or if you're as good as Bo, he literally can write the parts on the go and then write the cymbal parts on the, like, he's a freak. He's literally just a freak. Like,
one of the many talents he's got, I'm sure.
He's definitely a very talented dude. But Bo did it right. He's just done it all right, and he's probably going to have I don't know if the audience that are going to him now, if that's always going to be there, but like, as he gets older, I'm sure, people will grow, and, people often end up doing, in their later years, rock and rollers end up doing, like rockabilly and, acoustic, pop songwriters or whatnot end up becoming folk bands and, all that stuff. Like, they just, move into that more adult contemporary world. And I dare say a lot of the people Bo's worked with, if they choose to stay playing in bands, are going to continue to record with him into, even when the dude's 50,
At the end of the day, if you're a good producer and you've got a good attitude, people will keep coming back to you anyway, regardless of what you're known for doing. I'm sure that there were people who suddenly might change the style of music that they're doing, but no, he's a great producer and he's got a great attitude. I want to work with him. They'll go back with him anyway. And that's the thing, I've never had a chance to work with him. I don't really know him, but my experience from him, from all these other people that I have interacted, is that he's an incredible producer and a fantastic guy. So at the end of the day, that's good enough of endorsement for me, because I'd say the same about anybody else doing what I do, because yes, it's important to have good technical skills, but at the end of the day, that's a given. You have to have that. The most important asset you've got is your attitude.
Oh, absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And on that note, I might wrap this one up. Thank you so much for coming in and having a chat with us both.
You're welcome.
Man.
We've got a lot
awesome to have you in.
Thank you very much, fellas. I appreciate it. Thank you.
No worries. We'll sign that one off. Take care.
You too.